In this lesson, I'm going to talk to you really briefly about the difference between a career and a job. So it says right here, what's the difference? Sometimes these terms are used interchangeably, but in transition class here, I really want us to make a distinction between a job and a career. When you guys took an assessment the other day on paper, it asked you to list two main differences between a career and a job. And that information is going to come directly from this presentation. So now when you guys take the quiz again, hopefully you'll remember at least one, if not two, differences between a career and a job, and you'll be able to answer that question and get 100%. Okay? The purpose of knowing what the difference is so that when we go to research careers, you have an idea of what might be acceptable and what is more maybe a job rather than a career. So your learning target for today is to be able to list and explain one difference between a job and a career. Okay, so I'm just looking for you to be able to talk about one difference at the end of this lesson. In the future, you're going to add to that and eventually be able to do two and perhaps more. So you'll know you'll be successful when you can name the difference and then use one sentence to describe it. And that's it. So I have there a career in green and job in red, right? And underneath that is kind of like the Google definition. So if you Google what is a career, they say, oh, it's like a series of connected employment opportunities. So it's not just one particular job. And then they describe a job as something that you do to make money or to make a living. Okay, so the first main difference I want to talk about is the time in which you do both. Careers tend to be long-term, over many, many years, usually 20 to 30 years, whereas a job tends to be shorter term, maybe a couple months or a few years. Careers are almost always, but not always, worked full-time, okay, whereas jobs are usually worked more part-time. But again, I note here that it may be full-time. For example, you could work a job at McDonald's for 40 hours a week, full-time. And that's usually the distinction we make. So part-time is usually about 20-ish hours or less. So less than or equal to 20. Whereas full-time is usually 40 plus hours a week. Careers usually require more experience, education, or training prior to starting them. So for example, that could be schooling, college, going to trade school, getting a certification or a license. Whereas a job, typically no experience is required. For example, you could go out right now if you're 16 and apply for a job at McDonald's. They'll train you on the job. Careers, usually you have a higher pay, so more money. Usually when you're in a career, that's a salary, so you get paid a certain amount per year. Whereas in a job, it's usually less pay, and you're usually paid per hour. So if you've got an hourly wage, that's a good hint that it might be a job instead of a career. A really common exception to that rule would be plumbing, right? You pay a plumber per hour rather than a salary. Careers tend to be something that you're interested in, right? Especially because you've usually spent a lot of money going to school in order to start your career. So hopefully it's something that you're interested in and you really like. Your job you may like. You don't have to dislike your job. But typically people work a job because it's something that they have to do because they need the money. So it's more of a need than something that they're necessarily super interested in. And then I listed at the very bottom here some examples of careers. This is by no means exclusive. There are many careers that are not listed there. And then some examples of jobs, just to kind of give you an idea if, just in case that whole table up there didn't really make much sense and you're like, I still don't really know the difference. So you should hopefully by now be able to list and explain at least one difference between a career